In 1964, beneath the warm haze of manufactured moonlight, Hollywood was setting the stage for what should have been a flawless moment of romance. Two actors stood close enough to feel each other's breath. The score was cued. The rehearsals were done. Everything pointed toward something magical. Then it all fell apart. A sound tore through the silence, one that was neither dramatic nor beautiful, just absurd. So absurd that neither actor could hold a straight face. They cracked. The crew cracked. Every take dissolved into helpless laughter, and what was meant to be one of cinema's most tender scenes became a circus of chaos. The studio buried it immediately, and for decades the secret held. Until it didn't. Suddenly, one of the most beloved films in Hollywood history was carrying a story nobody had been meant to hear. Behind the breathtaking landscapes, the soaring melodies, and the love story that had moved generations, lay a production riddled with friction, near disasters, and simmering resentment. Two people stood at the heart of it all, living completely different versions of the same experience. One would deliver the performance of her life. The other would spend years wishing he had never shown up. To trace how it all unraveled, you have to travel back to before the cameras rolled, before the casting decisions, before Hollywood had any faith in this story at all. It starts with a single choice made by one woman that would quietly cost her everything. In the mid-1950s, Europe was still healing. The wounds of war were fresh, and people weren't searching for complexity. They wanted warmth, hope, and stories that felt like home. That need is what gave the Von Trapp family story its first foothold. A small German studio adapted Maria von Trapp's memoir into two modest films. Nothing groundbreaking, nothing lavish, but something real. Something that reached into people's chests and stayed there. Audiences felt it instantly. The story rippled across Europe with surprising force, moving people in ways that left Hollywood executives largely unmoved. To them it was too soft, too foreign, too sweet. America wasn't interested. Not yet. But one man refused to dismiss it. Where others saw sentiment, he saw power. He believed that the right telling could shake entire audiences to their core. And so he proposed something no one expected. Not another film, but a Broadway musical. That single pivot changed everything. A quiet European story became something theatrical, electric, and universal all at once. Yet even as momentum built, one unresolved problem loomed quietly in the background. The woman whose life had inspired all of it had already signed it away. Years before any of this, Maria von Trapp had sold the rights to her own story for just $9,000. It wasn't a business decision. It was survival. She was thinking about her family, not her legacy. She had no idea what she was truly letting go of. That one signature would eventually cost her millions, and she would spend the rest of her life knowing it. And yet without that decision, none of what followed could have happened. While producers navigated the complicated legal landscape, a new question emerged, one that would shape the story's entire future. Who could actually bring Maria to life? The answer arrived in the form of Broadway royalty. Mary Martin stepped onto the stage and something immediately shifted. The story found its heartbeat. Night after night, audiences didn't just watch the performance, they lived inside it. The theater hummed with emotion. And then the songs arrived, not recycled, not borrowed, but freshly written and instantly eternal. My favorite things. Do Re Mi Climb Every Mountain. These weren't just songs supporting a story. They became the story itself. The musical ran for years, dominated Broadway, and eventually made Hollywood impossible to ignore. But moving it from stage to screen was an enormous gamble, because the studio taking that gamble was already teetering on the edge. 20th Century Fox had just absorbed a crippling financial blow. A previous production had hemorrhaged money and shaken confidence throughout the entire organization. Now they were betting what remained on a musical that much of the industry still dismissed as too sentimental to survive. It was the kind of wager that could either resurrect a studio or finish it off completely. And from the very first day of production, it felt like anything could happen. Casting alone became a battlefield. And at its center stood a young woman who knew better than most what Hollywood rejection felt like. Julie Andrews had already conquered Broadway. Audiences loved her. Critics celebrated her. Her talent was undeniable. But when My Fair Lady made the leap to the big screen, the very role she had defined on stage was given to someone else. Hollywood decided she wasn't cinematic enough, wasn't glamorous enough. It was a public and painful dismissal, the kind that derails careers and silences momentum. But Julie Andrews didn't fade. She waited. And when her moment came, she didn't simply take the role of Maria. She inhabited it completely. Something in her performance transcended craft. She wasn't playing a character. She was one warm, genuine, full of quiet strength. Almost overnight, the industry that had underestimated her was watching her become something it couldn't ignore. While Andrews was finding her footing, the man beside her was fighting a very different internal battle. Christopher Plummer never wanted the role. He read the script and recoiled. It struck him as saccharine, hollow, completely beneath the kind of serious work he valued. He turned it down repeatedly. When he finally relented, it wasn't passion that changed his mind. It was obligation. On set, the resistance never fully left him. He was openly critical, privately mocking, emotionally distant from the character, the story, and the tone surrounding him. And yet he showed up every single day, disciplined and precise, delivering exactly what the scene required even when he believed in none of it. That inner war between contempt and commitment would become one of the most quietly extraordinary elements of the film's legacy. Because the resentment never reached the screen. What audiences saw was a cold, guarded man slowly cracking open, rediscovering love he thought he'd buried. They believed every second of it. That's the strange alchemy of filmmaking. What a performer feels and what a camera captures are sometimes entirely different things. Nowhere was that gap more visible than in the filming of the gazebo scene. On screen, it stands as one of cinema's most tender moments. Soft light, trembling emotions, a confession of love finally spoken aloud. Behind the camera, it was a complete disaster. The culprit was the lighting equipment. Enormous carbon arc lamps, essential for recreating moonlight, produced an absurd noise at the worst possible moments. Every time the actors moved close enough to kiss, the lights chimed in with a sound so ridiculous it made a serious scene impossible. Take after take collapsed. Laughter infected the cast and crew alike. Hours vanished. Nothing was usable. The director eventually accepted what couldn't be changed and rerouted around it. The scene was rebuilt in silhouette. Faces disappeared into shadow. Details softened into suggestion. What looked to audiences like a bold and beautiful artistic choice was, in truth, an act of creative rescue. Nobody knew for decades. And that wasn't even the most alarming moment on set. During the lake sequence, something genuinely dangerous happened. A 5-year-old actress, unable to swim, found herself in the water repeatedly when the boat capsized at the wrong angle. What was planned as a controlled shoot turned frightening in seconds. The timing failed. The safety margins collapsed. For a brief and terrifying stretch, this was no longer a film set. It was an emergency. When she was finally pulled to safety, the emotional weight of those moments didn't simply vanish. It settled into everyone present and stayed there. Even the film's most iconic image came at a cost. That breathtaking opening shot of Julie Andrews spinning freely across an alpine meadow looked like pure joy. What it actually required was repeated punishment. A helicopter circled overhead to capture the angle, and every pass hammered her with violent gusts of wind. She was knocked down again and again. Each time she stood back up, reset her expression, and gave the camera exactly what it needed. The audience would see effortless freedom. They would never see the falls. As the weeks stretched on, the production began to buckle under accumulated pressure. Weather disrupted schedules. Budgets swelled beyond projections. Tensions mounted at every level. There were genuine moments when it seemed like the whole thing might simply give way. But it held. Somehow it held. The film was finished, released. And then something no one had quite predicted began to happen. It didn't just find an audience. It found the world. Across languages, cultures, and generations, People responded to it with an intensity that stunned even its most optimistic supporters. It stopped being a film and became something more, a shared emotional landmark, a memory that belonged to everyone who had ever seen it. And it climbed to heights that seemed almost impossible. It overtook Gone with the Wind to become the highest-grossing film of its era. Musical. A story that half of Hollywood had written off as too gentle to matter. Behind that triumph were stories that almost no one ever heard. The laughter that destroyed a scene. The child pulled from the water. The leading man who despised the very project that would define him. The imperfections, the accidents, the quiet suffering behind the seamless surface. All of it fed into something that outlasted every doubt. And perhaps that's the deepest truth the sound of music carries. Its power doesn't come only from what it shows you. Comes just as much from everything it chose to hide.